Did you ever wonder what a real spy has to say about world politics today? Well, you're in luck, because today I've got one of East Germany's most successful spies on this show. Mr. Rainer Rupp was born in 1945 and grew up in West Germany, but started working for the East German intelligence services in the early 1970s. He was hired by NATO in 1977 and forwarded tens of thousands of NATO internal documents and plans to the East. He was only caught in 1993 after the end of the Cold War, serving then a prison sentence until the year 2000. Mr. Rupp, welcome.
Pleasure.
I'm very happy to speak to you because I really wonder, first about this past of yours. What was your motivation to work for the East Germans, and what have you learned during these 30 years in which you had to work in the shadows? 20 years in the shadows.
And preferably in one sentence, yes.
No, you can feel free as much as you would like to
Now,
tell us.
now I've always been someone who puts his money where his mouth is. And originally, I grew up in an environment where the Vietnam War was raging. When I was kind of 16, 17 or 14. And in this period, our media, like nowadays, was full with admiration for the Americans and domino theory, etc. And in fact, one thing really stuck in my mind was Berlin is defended in Vietnam.
Ah.
Berlin wird in Vietnam verteidigt. A little bit later, we have seen the same thing. German security is defended on the Hindu Kush, and that's not.
And Europe is defended in Kiev. Yeah, we know. Yeah, it
So
repeats.
you see the line. And I was really taken by that, and I said, why do we have to let the poor Americans fight there by themselves? And when I was 16, I knew the Americans were taking youngsters as of 16 into the army, and I wrote a letter to the U.S. Embassy in Bonn and asked for recruiting papers because I wanted to do my part. I never got an answer. Well, I thought I never got an answer. Many, many years later, while I was already working in NATO, you can imagine how much later, my mother, when I was visiting the family, put a paper, an envelope on the table and said, look here, what I found again. And the American embassy had replied, but my mother had confiscated it, opened it and confiscated it. Now, when I went to university, I then realized how I've been lied to. And I realized, and I knew, began to learn about all the crimes against humanity the Americans were doing there. And I was appalled by General Westmoreland's excuse when some American journalist asked him, well, but Vietnamese mothers love their children too. And he kind of said, no, that is another culture. You don't have to worry about that. You can still find it in the internet. And I've something along those lines. I can't, not literally. And I thought, what was I prepared to risk my life for? Something like that. So that was the origin of me beginning to doubt everything. Simultaneously, I was exposed to the teachings of Marx and Engels, and because I joined a leftist group, quite naturally, if you come to this kind of conclusions. And I never had, basically, although Marx was born and lived in Trier, and where I went to school, to a gymnasium, and Marx never been mentioned, really. just, they didn't exist. Not to talk about his teachings, or his, not teachings,
His
his
writings, his research.
writings or realizations or his tools he was giving us. And so I thought, oh, in many cases, the more I got into this, I said, oh, God, this is exactly what I've been thinking. It's only much better worked out and presented. And so I got into that line. And one day when there was a big demonstration against the what we called in those days Notstandsgesetzgebung, the emergency law which empowered the government to rule with military force in case of social unrest, because in those days there was quite considerable social unrest among students. That was in 1968. So it happened by sheer accident that I came across one of these talent spotters from the HVA. HVA is the East German Intelligence Service, foreign intelligence service, and we got to know each other, and we could have been my father, and he'd had ideas so completely different from the older generation I knew. And so we got to know each other. We played chess even 3 times a week, and he was very keen playing chess with me until I started beating him. And nevertheless, in the end, he talked about started talking about the GDR, not just theoretical socialism, because that's what we were all doing. What we would do if and what should be done, but he talked about the real existing
Communism, yeah, in the East,
where the naturally he admitted not everything was fine, but at least they had created the basis on which socialism and a genuine democracy by the people, not by the ruling class, could develop. And so I became interested, and in the end I went with him across the border, even with my own passport at the time, but that was the only first and last time. I spent a week there. I had asked to also move around, be free, because I didn't trust the East Germans, because after all, being left about not being East German, I mean, being pro-East German was quite natural in those days. And so I wanted to walk around by myself in some pubs, into some move around university, Humboldt University, etc. So at the end of my stay, I was I certainly, the farewell was, there were 3 more people there and asking me what I had thought about the GDR. And I said, well, I would prefer to stay here. Can't I stay here right away, help building, I remember that, help building socialism here? And they said, no, 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 no. We got enough people here building socialism. And I mean, those were the enthusiastic days also in the GDR. The identification with the task and with the republic, I mean, with the majority, of which nowadays you don't hear anything anymore. And they, no, we have enough people to build a socialism, but you, from the outside, you could help defend what we are building up here. So I was actually, what did that mean? And so they didn't come in with a secret service or anything like that, but against the background of the German neo-fascist party NPD at the time, They had just, I was at University of Mainz, just across the Rhine in Wiesbaden. They had moved in with, I think, about 10% or 11% of the vote into the Lander government. And on top of, and they said that's a very dangerous development, which I agreed. And would you couldn't you help us go to some of these meetings and see what they are, what's going on, in which direction, what they're talking about, what their targets are, etc. And I thought, well, that is an interesting suggestion. So that's how the thing started.
So, and from there, I mean, we are now talking about the late 1960s, right? Around 67, 68, I suppose. And
Yeah.
from there, you then graduated from university and you got hired by NATO and you were still in touch with people in the East.
Yeah,
Uh,
by then I was still in touch with people of the East. In fact, I got a grant for the Université Libre de Bruxelles, French-speaking Free University of Brussels, for 1 year, which I actually took. And that happened just to be after my so-called university midterm, after I had done all the Propedeutica. The next step would have been then working for the final examination. So I thought a year in Brussels would be quite good. And my handlers agreed with that. And so I went to Brussels, and their idea was that was the right direction to go, because they thought that the EU would move out sooner or later out of being an economic organization also into a political organization. And so the idea was that I would kind of move into that direction.
mhm.
As I spoke French already then fluently. English, what my English wasn't bad, so I've moved around quite nicely. I was recognized at university, and and I learned. I met a nice English girl uh, in Brussels, who is still my wife. I mean, we are married over 50 years. I mean, to the same person.
Congratulations. That's not self-evident anymore.
I
And
mean, it was really, truly through the ups and downs, and nevertheless, he, so when there are 2-3 years in which I then also worked. I went back to Bonn, did my final examination. Turned out to be a very, very good results. I was one of the. We in Bonn in those days we didn't have summa cum laude, but I was within the first 5. And with the languages, etc. Then I went back to Brussels to find a job in the EU. Just at that time, unfortunately, the Brits joined the EU, so there was no job actually for German newcomers or French or other newcomers, but in fact there were people given golden handshakes to leave their position so that Brits could join. But in those days were different from now. One didn't have to worry about jobs, so I got quite quickly another job, and in fact, as it happened to be, I've became the. I mean, already in those days, the titles were quite exaggerated. I became the director for industrial research with a British merchant bank. So analyzing the markets for British medium and medium-sized companies up to 5,000 people who wanted to find strategic partners in what you call it, the Golden Triangle in Belgium, Germany, and Netherlands, to expand into the EU, either to buy or to buy in.
Right. An analyst position.
Yeah. No, actually more than analyst, because I also had to go to the companies, talk to the targeted people, to the CEOs, and it gave me a lot of experience and also in understanding of the real problems of industry and of German industry, etc. So finally, but that got too specialized, got me far too far away. When I then got an offer from the former spokesman of the EU Foreign Department, of the Commission's Foreign Department, Dr. Baer, to join him as his right-hand assistant in the first EU lobbying group, because he got the golden handshake. I mean, he had the most beautiful offices in the most beautiful spot of Brussels on the Avenue Louise. I never had a better office later on. I had more important jobs, but that was so through him, I got to learn how lobbying is done, very important for the rest of my life, and how you connect between people, organizer, etc. One day, my wife, who worked meanwhile with the military commission of the UK embassy at the UK embassy to NATO, said, "Oh, there's a job in NATO which just fits your qualities. So why don't you?" Because before I had to travel quite a lot, which she didn't like. And so I applied, thinking I didn't clear that with East Berlin. So I applied, and it took almost a year. I still remember on the 7th of January, I got then, if I was still interested in the job, I should come for some interviews. And meanwhile, they've done the usual things of security clearances and so on. And I was from the outside. Normally, these jobs at NATO, which I learned later, were filled by people from the ministries, the national ministries, for 3 years or maximum 6 years. And external positions in analytical jobs didn't even exist. They came from as I learned later, my colleagues came from mostly from the not secret services, from the National Intelligence Services. I mean, the Brits from MI6, and he was the section head, and the Americans CIA, and the French from the GM Bureau, etc. There was a very nice French colonel who became my colleague, etc. Or DNB and Fu, and also imprisoned by the Vietnamese and then exchanged. So this is a kind, an Italian dottore who was a dyed-in-the-wool fascist. He admired the SS and the SS tank divisions and panzer divisions and what they achieved, and that's what we should do again. This a real mixture, but he also came from the Italian intelligence. So in this I then developed, and I think my earlier experience in industry, as well as in the I actually can't cross. I don't have the right the networking which I learned in the process of Euro lobbying up to the commissioners helped me a lot. So I got a lot of work. I got the work done very fast because I wasn't a bureaucrat. I had different ways of doing it. And in a bureaucracy, the more work you get done, the more they put on you. And in the end, in the end, my director, and on top of it, in large bureaucracies, you have the problem of empire building. Every director wants to anything new, like for instance SDI or so. Oh, that's something from my department. The other department also wants to have it because it's important. They like to be in the limelight and so on. And I also had a nose for these things. That's actually something for us. In the end, he decided that I should get all the papers that he gets. I should go through them and point out to him what would be good, would be good for us or would not be good for us. Meanwhile, I also had a reputation in the defense planning and armament divisions of being someone very useful and querdenker, useful to participate in new developments, or in new projects. So I was asked to join, and finally, my colleague, I always complained because I said I had enough job. But nevertheless, I got something, could get rid of something less interesting instead. In the end, my French colleague, the colonel, I won't mention his name, retired, and he was our China specialist because NATO also looked at China. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah, and
right, because China was an enemy of Russia, of the Soviet Union at the time. Right, they were having an internal fight.
Yeah, sure. So it was. But I have always been interested in China. I've never been a Maoist whatsoever, but in Chinese culture already as a child. And so I knew a lot, and then I wanted that job. And it's only twice a year expert meetings from the experts, meaning from the experts from the national intelligence services, the heads of the desk, China desk, and for the larger for the larger countries, for instance, like the United States, they also quoted someone from the DIA, or Defense Intelligence Agency, and someone flew in from the embassy in Beijing. So it depended. So we, in the end, out of these meetings, the secretariat, I had was the chairman. The secretariat then wrote a joint paper where we could all agree, which then went to all member states, and every member state knew this is NATO position. Yeah, I mean, basically, it was a position paper: what to do, what to do, about the developments of China. And so I became also a so-called China expert, and doing all the other jobs. The other jobs were also something which was of extreme interest, of course, for East Berlin and for Moscow. On a rotating basis, I was, what is, in the military terms, a situation center is?
A headquarter? No.
Huh?
Ahead.
The situation center is a center in which with normally, I think it's everywhere more or less the same, only not as big. The situation center was a special center within NATO, the Holy Grail, basically, in which you could only get into with another special pass. So not anybody could get into that. It was the center communications where all the overnight, I mean, over the last 24 hours kind of thing, information about new development, military, political, economic, of importance, which member nations were thinking NATO should know, came together. Intelligence results, DIA assessments on, say, a new Soviet air defense missile, etc. All that came into the center and situation center, and the current intelligence group analyzes every morning what comes in there together. And the current intelligence group consists of a chairman from the Political Affairs Directorate, always from the Political Affairs Directorate, inter alia me, and the others were then military experts, because they made different assessments on this, that, is that important, and then the report was then sent. We met in first thing in the morning, and the report was then sent out every day on a rotating basis, as I say, I was doing that. But on the rotating basis also meant that I had the possibility of every day doing the business, doing this, my job in the counterintelligence group or no, I could look into the what's happened in our library. I mean, and of course under surveillance. I couldn't take the stuff back into my office. But that was a very important thing, especially in times of crisis, because I was right. I would have been really a center part of any crisis, because normally in peacetime or in non-crisis situations, it was on a rotating basis once a day. But in for instance, in these Wiltex exercises, when we were training for the first use of nuclear war or first use of nuclear weapons on the East, we simulated over a week a full crisis developing. So in the end, the only inverted comma, the only way out was to use nuclear weapons against the Soviets.
In those planning games, yes.
What?
In planning games, in these planning scenarios, yes.
The idea behind and in situations like that, it was 6 hours, 6 hours, 6 hours. So there would be four like me and go around the clock. And after each 4 hours, we would inform the NATO the defense, the DPG, NATO Defense Planning Council, DPC, the NATO Defense Planning Council, consisting of the NATO ambassadors, who then would sit with a telephone and hand and were connected in real time to someone who represented the head of state, say in Germany. Not necessarily the head of state, but who represented the head of state in Germany, in Bonn, in the bunker. In the nuclear bunker, in the Ahrtal, you know that one,
I mean, I don't know them, but I would suppose there's like nuclear bunkers for all these heads of states who then communication.
It was about 20 km from in a deep hill, and And Willy Wimmer, who was for some of that time was CDU, and for some of this time he was a parliamentary secretary of State for Defense, and he represented the Minister of Defense in one of these games. And in fact, it was in one of actually the last game in which NATO, the first time ever, the Germans had stopped the American planners from doing it. But in this last game, that was already after 85, they were supposed to attack with nuclear weapons, 2 nuclear weapons on East Germany, one on Dresden, another one near the Polish border. And Willy Wimmer stopped the game, the German participation of the game, and said, no, we're not participating in this. Actually, a very brave man. I'm still in contact with him because we've been seeing these kind of situations from the same perspective. So at the same time, there was, this gives you an idea how important the situation was also for the East and also for times of crisis.
And I'm sorry to intervene because I'm highly interested in this, but for the sake of bringing this together, I just would like to say, like, okay, so you were in the center of this, in the center of the operational planning and intelligence of NATO, and you forwarded all of this to the East. All of it went over there as much as you could, I suppose.
Yes.
And what do you think that did, this exchange of information, making sure that the East and thereby also the Soviet Union knew what NATO was up to? Was this an important part of keeping the whole structure somehow stable?
Well, as you see, if you, for instance, all the defense planning, the NATO defense planning also went over and for the forward defense planning up to 5 years and up to 10 years, which was updated every year in a very big and cumbersome process, went also over my desk and basically went over there. And one time, they even boasted they had the final results before the NATO ministers on their table.
You were good, and the East Germans were quick.
And yes, now if I'm quite sure you are aware of game theory, yeah.
Yes.
If I have a pack of cards, and I know your pack of cards, in the case of a real serious game, you can do what you want. You lose. Yeah. The point is, did I do that for the East to win a war? No. The point is that and I saw that with my own eyes in one of the most secret, the top document of one of the most, or that most secret document of NATO, the Military Committee 161, which is a annual result, updated result of, or at least was, updated result of over 40 subcommittees looking at all defense aspects, and was a pile of documents like that. So about 50-centimeter documents. And the top document, which was on strategy, it said quite clearly, the Soviet Union doesn't want a war with NATO. Their strategy is, if a war breaks out, they do not want to have, they do everything that the war will not be fought on socialist territory, but to carry it across into the territory of the aggressor. Now, NATO, or especially American generals, always said, when the argument came about intentions and capabilities. And I said, we couldn't care less about intentions. They have the capability. So we have to do it. If you then look behind all that, they were aggressive and we are not defensive. So in that respect, my in a way, not in a way, even the court, because all the documentations also from the other side was actually available to the court and to their experts. Even the kind of gave me some bonus points and reduced the sentence from lifetime to 12 because I did it. My motivation was not they mentioned that was not monetary. There was no monetary motivation, but my motivation was to help prevent misunderstandings out of which a war could develop, and in fact to prevent the war. So that was helped me helped me to instead of 15, I only served. I got me a 12-year sentence instead.
So, and if you, sorry, we have to jump again, but
No,
if you
no.
take all of this into consideration, I mean, then the Cold War ended, and it ended successfully in the sense that it didn't end in a war, in a hot war. It actually ended in a peaceful resolution. And as Jack Matlock, the former U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union, keeps repeating time and again, it ended because both parties were in agreement that it should be ended. So, and this sharing kept also Europe safe. And now we go forward, and you look at how NATO is acting and behaving today, and we look at how Russia, in what position Russia is, and the old messaging and signaling about Ukraine for, again, defending Europe in Ukraine. What is your assessment of the current moment?
It hasn't changed. The attitude and the behavior of NATO hasn't changed. I mean, they're pushing, they're provoking, they were pushing, and in order to trigger the Russians to react, and
to provoke them,
and to provoke. And when the Russians react, then great moral exaggeration. Yes, look, we are defensive. We are moving to your doorstep with all our weapons because we are nice. Trust us. Yeah.
Yeah.
After what they've done in Yugoslavia, yeah. Trust us. In Europe, no. I mean, it's just. It was before. It was the same, only much more cleverly done, and the general trust in the West and in NATO was far more was deeper instilled and based than it is nowadays. And nowadays come across more and more people who actually not so long ago who say, well, I always wondered, but seeing what is going on now, I understand what you've done.
Okay.
In my personal environment, yeah. And so I'm not doing anything about that. I'm not going around and saying, look, you trust me. But anyone with a bit of common sense sees what is happening.
But so is it fair to say that while the end of the Cold War was detrimental to the development of the East, naturally, like politically,
Yeah.
it didn't change the institutions in the West. So the NATO you worked for in the 1970s, 80s, and early 90s is still the same beast. It's still the same mentality. And
in fact, I've always been writing articles. I mean, with the permission of the Secretary General or the head of the information. also for the NATO review, which was the internal glossy document which was spread around NATO embassies, I mean NATO country embassies, etc. After the fall of the wall, or and the IMF moving into Russia and helping Russia with finance, yeah. The representative of the Austrian Handelskammer, trade and
The
association
chamber, the commercial chamber
in
of
Brussels, yeah, in Brussels, whom I had known for donkey's years, he said, Rainer, why don't you write an article on that aspect? And it was published in their magazine, once monthly magazine, I think it was. I still got it downstairs. And I put it because the Austrians they wanted to keep the purchasing power of the Soviet Union alive, the purchasing power of the East. They wanted to make business with them. They didn't want to plunder them. Yeah, this is a different approach completely. And I pointed out, I remember that sentence as a subheading, for every $10 billion the IMF gives to the Soviet Union, the Soviet government, I mean the Russian government, and the Soviet government was still Soviet government. The Soviet government is destroying 100 billion worth of assets with those
funding
reforms, yeah. The shock and awe reform policy.
The Jeffrey Sachs doesn't get tired of telling us that in the 90s, I mean, but his approach was to say we need to support the ruble and make sure that the economy doesn't collapse, but he didn't get any support from Washington for that one.
Absolutely not.
And
they wanted to get. It was the British of their colonial times. They still have, I think, that saying, kick them when they're down.
Do you, at this time, I mean, there was so many promises made, especially in order to unite the two Germanys. And unification, it wasn't the unification, it was like West Germany taking over East Germany. And but there were so many promises made. Have you ever, within these discussions, heard NATO planners say, like, yes, once that's done, or once we get to them, we will get to the Russians? I mean, Russia is next. Was that a plan, or is that just something that seems to have emerged later on?
I think it was opportunism. We can do it, let's do it. Out of the situation, out of the chaos in Russia. And now, there might have been, I never seen a plan for that. Apart from that, as of July 1993, I was behind bars. And so my possibilities to keep informed, at least for a while, were quite restrained. And nevertheless, I remember Lord Ritsdale was his name, and I don't shy back after. He's probably dead by now because he was older than me, and I'm already 80. So Lord Ritsdale was a member of the British group that came together once with other members of the North Atlantic Assembly parliamentary groups. So you know what the North Atlantic Assembly is. It was NATO was trying to give itself a kind of a cloak of democratic co-determination, and so there was a North Atlantic Assembly where selected members of national parliaments were representing their countries. And Lord Ridsdale, who was a member of a lord of the upper house, said to me, I should add, they had twice annual meetings, and always in very, very nice places, very luxurious. Also the food, and really all around NATO countries. So when I was asked by the Secretary General to go and talk to them, I was not rejecting it. So I became a kind of almost annual or semi-annual speaker at this conference. At one of these conferences, Lord Ridsdale, after lunch, came to me and said, yes, of course, we talked about the Soviet Union, but he came and said about Russia, Mr. Rupp. Yes, Russia got everything we need, but we are not allowed to take it. But one day will come when we put our hands on it. And I thought, oh, you stupid old fart. Sorry, excuse my French, but this sentence was one of the sentences I remembered very often in jail while I was sitting in my cell. Yeah. They actually managed to do it, luckily enough, only for a limited time. But they still haven't given that up. You know, the efforts going around about decolonizing Russia.
Yeah, a stupid sentence, but yeah.
Yeah, and even Callas been calling for it. There's a few,
That's the colonial empire.
yeah, and even in Germany, in Berlin, we had a year of 2023. There was a big meeting.
But I would really want to get your opinion on this, like the political theater, the drama that we are seeing on the TV screens, the propaganda, in my view, only got worse. I mean, it only got much stronger and much more theatrical. Also to the point where these actors on stage keep like brabbling about democracy while tearing it down, like with like obviously bringing society down, but screaming and yelling mordio about it, and at the same time building up that the Russian boogeyman, which for all intents and purposes by now we understand a lot, even people who were not on that track in the beginning understand that there is more to this story than just evil imperialism. Didn't this intensify? I mean, isn't this a new phenomenon that the theatrics is so dramatic while the backgrounds become so simplistic? Wasn't this in the Cold War more? Wasn't there more coherence among the signaling on to the own population and the actions of these institutions?
I actually personally, I would think it's just the opposite.
Really?
In the Cold War, they did not have much problem in convincing their population, except towards the end of it. If you're talking, Ronald Reagan put the fear of God into them and his warmongers, and with the dislocation of the Pershing II and the cruise missiles, etc. Then things developed in a, but we don't see this fear of God or fear of the end of the world anymore.
Yes.
I mean, you must see I lived through that period, and it's indeed, it's like in a Greek drama. It's the inevitability of madness. It just moves forward, and it's not just your own death. It's not just your own family. It's
It's everything.
nations are wiped out. Yeah, I think that is I think that gave people with a completely different feeling. Now, as the ruling class had real great problems to back down from this, and they were helped by the Russians, and by the flexibility of the Russians. But
They're accommodating 8 years of proxy warfare in the Donbass and so on. Yes.
and nowadays, as you see, I don't agree with Garganov's many other positions, but we've got some good ones. But there are there are strong differences if you would go into the details. But I agree with one thing, that the Western elites try to instill in the population that there is no fear of nuclear war. The Russians are only bluffing. Yeah, but you're aware of probability theory.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a situation in a machine, say one of the cogs that goes round and is got a slightly touch of out of whack, which is the probability of, say, 1 in 1,000. Sooner or later, it will break. Yes, it's just this. Now, if we are looking at the possibility of sliding on that slippery slope of political warmongering, of sliding into a situation which would end in a nuclear war, not a big nuclear war, but with use of nuclear weapons, put it that way, to start off with. What is the probability? The probability of the various factors going into this, and how long is that supposed to last? And if you add those, giving each of these factors a likely, of probability, then it gets really dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
Yeah.
I can show it to you also on a real case where I was considerably, I feared, that was in 2020, August, September 2022. After the Russian special operation, the Americans deployed 5,000 screaming eagles in Eastern Europe. The Screaming Eagles are belonging to that's the name. I mean, it's a hailed. It's a very famous airborne troops, 101st Airborne, and 4,000 in Romania and 1,000 in Poland, and that was in spring. And by the time autumn came, the commander generals got in front of the American press and said, now we are already installed, we are ready to go, we can march tomorrow or tonight, anytime, across the border into Ukraine. Yeah, now what would have happened if some crazy guy had given that order? They would have been attacked by the Russians. The Russians were just waiting for that. Now, 4,000 Screaming Eagles, airborne, they're not heavily, don't have any heavy weapons or anything like that. They would have been annihilated by the Russians. So what would have happened? There would have been uproar in the American Congress, in the media. We have to do something, we have to do something, we have to punish the Russians. But how can you punish the Russians? You haven't got any more means to punish the Russians. More sanctions, more this, more that. Yes, think about how long it took to build up the war against Iraq for the Americans,
Yes.
against the second-class depleted month and month. Now, what we have to do something. We can't let get the Russians away with it. We have to punish them, and we are the strongest where we have the best and the nuclear. So let's throw a little nuclear bomb.
Yes. No, this situation is highly dangerous, but at the same time, we actually saw how it seems to me that for 3.5 years, the strategy, the primary strategy of making Ukraine a proxy war or an implementation war or a coalition war that is fought in Ukraine against Russia, that was defended actually. You remember that instance when a Ukrainian missile killed two stray missile killed two Polish peasants, and the Ukrainians were screaming it was the Russians. And that's the first time NATO really, really got mad at Mr. Zelensky and said, like, shut up, because if that goes out, if that goes through, then we have to go and fight, and we don't want to. So shut up and keep fighting. And they maintained that position.
Luckily enough, there are still some sober minds around. Yeah, not only Kiesewetters and others. Yeah,
the top warmongers in Germany. Yeah, but so the public rhetoric and the actual operational planning obviously are two different things, right?
yeah. Absolutely, they cannot do it. But they think. I mean, if you study what's happening in Ukraine, the way I watched a detailed video about one of the latest attacks, Russian attacks, and it was a symphony. I'm talking like in music, a symphony of the use of the various weapon systems and groups, etc., to come to a result. I mean, working at the in the precision of a clockwork. Now this one starts. That one has finished. The results have proven. The next part, weapon system starts, etc. And the West doesn't even know what that means. The Ukrainians definitely not, but the West doesn't even know what it means. The 8,100 body bags the Bundeswehr has ordered, but they have not yet been supplied, they would be used in a week.
Mm-hmm. The Russians are highly, I mean, the military abilities are, if anything at all, they prove that they are extremely high, while the Europeans still keep claiming that.
Yes, they have now 4 years of experience. 4 years of experience. And but the question is now, would they march on to Europe? It's ridiculous. Again, intentions. What would they would they want to inherit our European problems, our German problems, or would they want German technology? No. I mean, even in our most famous German technological branch, machine building industry, we are mostly meanwhile behind the Chinese.
Right.
There was a year ago, there was an annual report by the Association of Machine Builders, and they said of the, I think, 25 or 27 branches they have, in the majority of these branches, the Chinese are already ahead of us, ahead of the Germans, and in quality equal, if not better, and cheaper. And in the other areas, they are picking up rapidly. And now we wonder why our export industry, despite is not working anymore. Now, talking about the Russians, why would they come? Why would they want? What would they want here? They would need to even to go to the west of Ukraine. They would need another 500,000 people in arms to control them against the Bandera Nazis, who, with their death cult, who don't even shy away from suicide attacks. So it's a I mean
It's a,
it's
it's a ludicrous proposal. It's a ludicrous idea, but this is the number one idea with which currently the warmongers defend the idea that we need to warmonger even more in Western Europe, and go to all-out war with Russia. However, judging from what we just said, the operational planning in NATO probably doesn't contain this scenario, does it? So it's a ratcheting up of war hysteria, but the actual operational planning probably knows the inferiority of NATO over the Russian war machine.
sure. How many? Look at the you can just go to the Swedish institute. What is it? SIPRI. To SIPRI to find out what is the fighting force of the British Army. Yeah? I mean, and how many would actually be deployable into Ukraine?
Couple of
Ridiculous.
10,000.
Yeah, between maximum 20,000. Yeah, then they would be all eaten up.
Yeah. So, in your mind, and sorry, two questions. In your mind, what does this tell us about where, especially the Europeans, are likely to go, or the NATO alliance is likely to go? And secondly, is there something that we didn't talk about yet that you think is extremely important to understand the current situation correctly?
I think to understand the current situation correctly, I mean, if you think of the military situation or the situation of the Western elites, why do they do they stick together like mad and make decisions which is at the worst for their own people?
Yeah, both.
I mean, that is quite a phenomenon, isn't it?
It is. It's
And I've been studying this for a while, and in fact, it's a and it goes back to the New World Order created under Bush Senior, 1989, 80, 90. And I think that would take too long now.
but
Uh,
would you say it's fair to say that these elites have transcended the nation? They are more loyal to each other and to the network and to the center in
Absolutely.
Washington than to their nations.
Absolutely, because they are in order. It is quite clear to them, if I'm outside, I'm out. I'm not only out, but I'm financially, prestige, etc. out. But you must not remember, you have to remember even two Bundespräsidenten, two presidents of Germany got out because they said the wrong things. Köhler, remember?
Yeah, and I don't remember Köhler, but the second one is the one with the dissertation.
He was the deputy head of the IMF,
Yeah.
and he became he got the highest position in Germany, Bundespräsident. He hasn't got much to say, but it's
symbolic.
Protocol, the highest position in Germany. And he got the job, and that was just in the height of the banking problem and the financial crisis.
2008, huh?
2008, 2009, and the following years now. And what did he say? He talked about the monsters in the financial system.
Huh.
The monsters in the financial system. And didn't take long, he was out. And the other one, you know the other one? I don't think
the one with the dissertation, right? He was attacked for his dissertation, which and later on he was cleaned off. Not Gauch.
No. He had a blonde wife.
I don't remember. Yeah, but
and he actually it was the situation where the Bundestag, the German Parliament, decided 100 billion rescue, just like that, overnight, 100 billion rescue packet for some German banks.
Right.
And he didn't want to sign it.
Uh,
Remember? He refused to sign it into law.
right.
And then there was suddenly, they found some dirt on him, etc. And soon he was out.
Right.
He resigned. Someone else like.
Yeah, so you have the right elites in the right places and like loyal not to the nation but loyal to the bigger project. Some people call it globalism, some people just call it like US imperialism. And so this is the sellout, but on the other hand you still have the operational arm NATO that then also now stretches straight into the European Union through these joint ministerial meetings and so on. I had Everest Bartolo, former foreign minister of Malta, telling me how this works, how how the foreign ministers first meet in a NATO gremium, and then like 2 hours later they meet in the EU, and they carry the same agenda. So we still have the operational arm of this monstrosity, but that the operational arm seems to be the more rational one, trying to contain the war inside Ukraine. So where's that one going? Because that monster's still here. But in my view, it's not very stable anymore. I mean, the political situation is now working against this arrangement.
Yeah, yeah. It's you find more and more people who have difficulties believing the narrative, the official narrative. And I've listened just Monday at the Deutschlandfunk controversy program is something you should have a look at. I sent you the link to it. It is really an intellectual underground. It's not possible. And Ukraine is still winning, and the Russians are literally the Russians have a priority in killing civilians in the Ukraine. Yeah.
Usually this comes from the same people who will tell us that Israel is protecting every single Palestinian life. The same people usually who say that.
I mean, I'll send you the link. It's you just listen to the introduction to the program,
Please.
and if you have extra time, it's abhorrent.
Yeah, but aren't we getting closer and closer to this point? The Soviet Union in the end did have a big problem, which is that the public messaging didn't cohere anymore with the economic realities people saw.
Yeah,
And isn't this exactly what Europe is going through right now? And this
yeah.
must be getting, I mean, at some point there must be a European Gorbachev.
We have yes, but a European Gorbachev doesn't work. We haven't got a Europe. We haven't got a Europe.
That's the
thing. And but it would be sufficient if we had a kind of a European Gorbachev in one of the big European countries, such as France.
Right.
Because if one of those is actually leaving and showing the way out, the others have no way of holding the line.
Right.
No way. And maybe Great Britain, Sama is very much at the end of his time, and he's worse liked now by the British than Liz Truss.
Which is a very big achievement, yeah.
That is quite an achievement in that time. So, but what if one of those actually gets out and it doesn't need to be a perfect one, just steps out of the madness, the rest will crumble. I'm 100% sure.
Do you think NATO will survive another 70 years?
No way. No way.
Right.
No way, because you can see it. Meanwhile, under Trump, the American elites have turned into using their vassals not anymore as as a playground for the big corporations, but as a country to exploit. Yeah.
Yeah, this the colonization, basically, the reverse
Yeah, a kind of
colonization.
a neo-colonization going on. And yeah, there are too many. It'd be interesting, actually, if I had time, or if I was a professor, I would tell my students to make a matrix of the NATO countries and what their positions in the different crises or different issues are. And you see that is going that way. That would be
Yeah, at some point,
any students.
at some point, the coherence will break down. We can see it. We can see it with Hungary. We can see it with Slovakia, and this will only increase. The fear is, of course, that this then will create some sort of panic reactions among among those elites that are actually have power over the operational arm.
Yes, that is the alternative with which we have to, and I wouldn't exclude it. We will either go, this can't last, but we will either go into a real authoritarian state, or back to some common sense again, and back to an ordinary bourgeois democracy. I'd be already happy. It doesn't need to be socialist democracy. Back to a bourgeois democracy, I'd be already very happy.
Just not a fascist, a kleptocratic superstate. But well, Rainer Rupp, we haven't even touched so much on the economy yet, but I do hope to talk to you again when the opportunity arises. If I usually ask people at the end of the show where they publish their things, but you said your things are a little bit everywhere. Is there any place you would like to share with us where you recommend people go and read?
Well, all my articles, I think there are hundreds of them over the years, can be found on a website, Rainer Rupp-Kundschafter.
Okay, I will look it up and I will put it into the description box of this video below. Rainer Rupp, thank you very much for your time today.
It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.